Well, India has jumped 8 places on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's annual International Intellectual Property Index. The report analyzes IP climate across 50 world economies based on 45 indicators critical to an innovation-led economy. India currently ranks 36. So what worked in our favor? Well, better adherence to copyright protection norms, strong awareness against piracy may have tilted the scale in India's favor, but a lot remains to be done. Patrick Kilbride, Senior Vice President of Global Innovation Policy Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, joins us now. Patrick, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Good to have you back. You know, you and I have had this chat several times in the past, every time you put out this index. And the quibble here in India has been that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has treated India unfairly when it comes to the IP index. But finally, there is an acknowledgement that things have changed and hence India's up 8 places. What made you change this rating?
Good evening, Shereen, and thank you for having me back. We didn't do anything to change this ranking. Really, it's all the things that have happened in India that are positioning the country to take advantage of a global knowledge economy and to be a real leader in the innovative and creative sector. So as you mentioned, we've seen new commitments to participating in international treaties, such as the WIPO Internet Treaty, that allows Indian artists and creators to take advantage of the e-commerce space without being subject to rampant piracy. It has implemented government-wide intellectual property enforcement efforts. And these are all part of a growing, I think, political will to put India at the forefront of the knowledge economy that was reflected in the 2016 National IPR policy. And it took a couple of years, but now we're seeing real traction and momentum from that policy, and the results are apparent in the index that we released today.
Okay, so you're saying that the policy that was put in place in 2016 is now translating into action, which is being reflected in the index. But which are the changes or which are the indicators of the 45 indicators that you measure where you've seen the most significant difference when it comes to India?
So the interesting thing to reflect on is that, you know, this is the 7th edition of the U.S. Chamber International IP Index. And our index has grown along with India's position in the space. So at the same time that India was taking on important reforms related to empowering domestic innovators and creators, the Chamber's index was growing and expanding both in terms of its country coverage and its and the scope of the laws and regulations that it covers. So in 2012, when we first put this out, India was one of 11 countries ranked, and you know, maybe not surprisingly, was the last of 11 because it was being compared to the likes of Japan and the United Kingdom and the United States. Over time, as we've been able to expand the country coverage of the index, we're able to draw more useful analysis to understand better how the policy decisions that India is making related to IP compared to those of more of its peers. You know, for instance, Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, for instance. And that has really made it a much more useful tool. The other thing that we've done, and really very specifically, I think, in response to the conversations we've had in India with Indian stakeholders, is that we've built into the indicators, and you mentioned there were 45 this year, up from 25 in the first edition in 2012. So we've been able to build in some of the foundational architecture that allows countries to empower their domestic innovators and creators. India, especially in the last 2 years with its implementation of the national IPR policy, has done well on those new indicators, and that's been reflected in the score.
Okay, very quickly, Patrick, before I let you go, so the areas where more work needs to be done, according to the survey?
What innovators need, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a foreign investor or an Indian startup. What you need to make a risky investment, a costly investment, an innovation that may or may not work, is a reliable patent on the back end or a copyright if you're a filmmaker, that you can say, all right, if I get this right, and I'm taking a risk, but if I get it right, I can get a return on my investment. What we're looking for more than anything is certainty. In the patent space, you see that in patent eligibility rules that remain ambiguous. In the copyright space, it's the availability of clear statutory damages. So what we need is that political will that says, yes, we've got this momentum from the 2016 policy, and we are committed as a nation to carrying this forward because we believe that India wins if we are at the forefront of the knowledge economy. So there's a number of specific changes that can take place, but what we really need to see is the political will to say India is going to be the leader in the global innovation economy.